Welcome. The name of the topic, I'm Merrill Schindler, once again. Name of the topic is Behave Yourself Over There. That's not the name of the topic. It has a somewhat ponderous name. On the forefront of medical cannabis innovation, the struggles and triumphs in transforming the wellness industry, which basically boils down to, so CBD, what is it, and is it that good, or is it this year's pet rock? What is it? Maybe it's like oat bran. Anyone here old enough to remember the oat bran? Yeah, we all clogged ourselves up with oat bran. That was pretty terrible. Or indeed, is it the great tulip panic from the Dutch? We don't know yet. We don't know yet. But I'm the host of a radio show called High in the Hog, the podcast. And the show evolved as sort of a goof. It began off as basically two alta cockas driving around in a car, getting stoned like in the old days, and talking smack. And then we began to realize that there was this CBD stuff, and the CBD stuff, people were interested in it. It seemed to heal. It wasn't just getting stoned. It was the not THC part of cannabis. And, you know, for those of us who, you know, getting stoned back in the day meant you smoked a J, you went out, you got some pizza. This was, my knees hurt. I can't sleep. I have anxiety. What the heck am I to do here? So the show evolved into basically a medical cannabis show with a far older demographic of people who have parts that hurt. And I did it thanks to the participation of Joanna Belson, the cannabis connoisseur, and arriving here, the excellent Janice Hardoon of the K-Town Collective, and The Antidote, which is a store on Melrose dedicated to CBD. It's dedicated to healing. And like many of the people on this panel, I would imagine, I'm going to ask you about your experiences and to introduce yourselves, because I'll mispronounce your names. Like many of the people on this panel, many of these people in this room, your experience with CBD began out of necessity. Mine began out of necessity a year ago when I came down with an inexplicable autoimmune disorder called bullous pemphigoid, which sounds a lot like a Turkish chicken dish. And it was no laughing matter. I was covered with basically blisters from head to toe. I was itching all the time. I was basically pulling my skin off. I was a miserable human being. It took me 2 months to even get it diagnosed. I would go to one doctor after another who would go, I don't know what you got. I've never seen this before. I mean, I was looking at, could it be syphilis? What was it? Like I said, back in the day. And someone finally who wasn't a dermatologist said, you should get a biopsy. Got a biopsy, and they said, 3 biopsies. They said, congratulations, you have bullous pemphigoid. I said, what? And then it took another month to find the single doctor in Southern California who knows what the stuff is. And aside from some very expensive medications and tons of steroids, what really made me feel better was CBD. CBD cream that would stop the itching, nothing else had. CBD to help me sleep. CBD to bring down the anxiety. It's, knock on wood, gone now. But my experience was one very personal, that CBD, though there has not been nearly enough research, thanks to the attitude of our government that marijuana is as dangerous as heroin, and I believe more dangerous than opioids, if I'm correct. So it's really, everything's anecdotal. And my anecdotal experience is, this stuff's brilliant. This is the best thing since sliced bread, and sliced bread doesn't heal you. So let's go through the panel. See, next to me we have
Dr. Robbie Flannery.
And you came to cannabis through personal experience? You came to it through just fun? You came to it as an investor? How so?
Well, let's just say I've got a specific expertise in cultivating, and I have a PhD in plant biology with an emphasis in environmental horticulture and a specific expertise in hydroponic crop optimization for cut flower production and controlled environment agriculture from UC Davis, which I'm very proud to say was just recently voted the #1 plant science school on the planet by U.S. News and World Report.
Congratulations. Congratulations. And you are?
Ms. Kindness Ramirez.
And thank you for pronouncing your first name, which I was sure I was going to butcher.
Just like it's spelled.
It's just Miss Kindness.
Yes, yes.
And Miss Kindness, aside from being a very kind person, how did you come to cannabis?
Well, I came to cannabis through a personal story. So I'm like you. I was injured and then did some research and discovered that cannabis could heal my body. And as a former classroom educator, I decided to take what I had just learned and bring it to the space to help educate others.
Okay. And you are Nancy?
I'm Nancy Deitch, and I started out in this business from a business perspective, and I come from the consumer products good space, and I've been searching for a long time to find the right ingredients that will really make a difference. And my big why is because my brother and sister in their 20s both dropped dead from a heart condition, each of them 10 years apart. And I have always had to really take good care of myself. I have the same genetic heart condition, and so called long QT syndrome. And so no doctor will ever operate on me unless it's an emergency. And so I've always tried to find the right answers for me and for other people who are going through medical dilemmas like I have. And so when I discovered CBD, and I spoke to all the doctors that I consulted with, it was the only thing they allowed me to take that was outside my beta blockers that was really helpful for me. And then adding that ingredient into skincare, adding it into wellness products has really made a difference in my life.
It's interesting you would say that they allowed you to take it, because my experience with most doctors is when you bring it up, they'll go, well, sure, try it.
So let me
they
tell you.
weren't encouraging exactly.
Yeah, I'll tell you what the difference was. It was either, can I get some plastic surgery because I'm older, or do I take the CBD and put it in skincare and do something? So it was either a natural course, and I'm very fortunate that I have good relationships with all my doctors. So for them, it was much better.
Yeah.
I take a more natural approach. And by the way, my doctors, who are much older and much more established, are really not adverse to marijuana or CBD.
They are generally, in my experience, curious but very hesitant about putting their
Uneducated.
name on the recommendation.
Correct. There would be no prescription, but
Right.
Now, Janice Hardoon, I work with you every week doing the podcast, High on the Hog, and I know that your experience in cannabis goes back well more than a decade.
Yes, I have, after sitting next to a doctor in kindness in a heart condition, I'd like to be mindful that I've got 12 years in cannabis space. I've owned and operated Koreatown Collective, which is now on Melrose and Martell, and it was a vertically integrated collective that we would take things from clone all the way to flower, take our byproducts, make our own edibles, make our own flowers and concentrates. And now we've had to reinvent ourselves into 2019. I'm a very big advocate, as you know, of skincare, CBD skincare, and all the attributes that you can do that. I think using CBD and topicals is a great introduction for anyone that has any questions about what cannabinoids can do for you and how it can enhance your life. So I'm a very big advocate of that, and I see it going forward.
And you have essentially seen the industry go from stormtroopers breaking your door down to
Yes, I was a recipient of one of those.
yes, to medical, where with some difficulty you get a permit, and then you get the permit on your cell phone by just saying, I
Well,
just
now
feel
I
like
think
it."
that people
to
got confused with-
recreational now.
Well, I think that the proper word to use is adult use. And I think that you'll find most cannabis users or adult users are using it, maybe they're using it recreational, but they're also covering up some ailment or some story, because everyone does have a story that brings them to cannabis life. But I think that people use it for a reason. I don't know that there's a lot of people that take advantage of cannabis. I mean, you can't overdose on cannabis, so you're gonna wake up. You may eat too much edible and have a bad experience and pray to God. Guess what? You're not going to do it again. You're going to learn to take it in doses. But it's the same thing as going to CVS and getting cough medicine. Are you going to take it the way it's prescribed on the back of the box? Or are you going to drink the whole jar down all in one sitting? So it's an education, and I think that the more we can educate and empower the people about cannabis and marijuana or CBD or how it can help their life, the more you're going to really see the opioid crisis shrink.
Which is what High on the Hog is all about. Mrs. Shoebring, how do you come to this room of miscreants?
Well, folks, can you hear me okay? I'm trained as a chemical engineer, and I started doing forensic work because there was work in it. And a young gent by the name of John Holowach approached me. Would I like to get in the film business with him? And so excellent. I'm getting stage direction back here. Just couldn't see it at first. A young gent by the name of John Holowach approached me. He was an aspiring film director, and he had an idea for a documentary called High, The True Tale of American Marijuana. So we shot that. We spent 3 years on the road doing it and then editing it, and it finally came out on Amazon in 2008.
Give us the name again.
High, The True Tale of American Marijuana.
Okay, thank you.
And what struck me during, when you do indie filming, an executive producer doesn't sit in an office. An executive producer is out on the road carrying tripods and cameras and trying to make sure that the store didn't close before the director's done with the interviews so that we can get more tape. We used tape back in those days. Can you believe it? Anyhow, the thing that struck me in the process of interviewing all these folks who had not only bad experiences in the cannabis sector, but bad experiences generally with the DEA, was that the DEA didn't really consider any drug legitimate. The only thing they considered useful was get everybody off of everything, and we've done our job. Otherwise, everybody is a druggie and a national security threat, and we got to think about locking them up, which means 99% of the population has to be locked up by 1%, so we have to invent robots to do that. Well,
when you consider that
so I ended up following the movement ever since. Yeah. I subsequently became a chronic pain patient myself, and I co-founded a pain charity based in Toronto with another filmmaker, Tina Petrova, who lives there. And our goal is to try to get patients to speak up for themselves.
And that's give pain a voice.
Yes. Because if patients are not speaking up for themselves, other people are trying to speak for us, and they're getting all their facts wrong because they aren't asking anybody anything.
And Mr. Traub.
So actually, it's very interesting for me to be sitting here because I've been sitting there for the last 28 years.
Get used to it.
Pretty much every show.
Y'all can duke it out.
Exactly. No, I'm grateful. It was great. I didn't have to write a speech or anything. 3 bullets. 3 bullets. Personal story first. I've been around the business for 35 years. The founder of the Emerald Cup actually helped me put me through grad school with green money. It was cash. A long time ago. And but I had a friend here who was sitting over here yesterday in one of my panels. He was given 15 days to live, sent to hospice, stage 4 pancreatic cancer, stage 4 lymphoma, and he got his doc to inject a certain strain of CBDs into his pancreas. That was 12 years ago. Wow. And he's just raised multiple millions of dollars and is producing his own and nanosizing his own brand right now. He was the first federally registered pot patient. He then saved his daughter-in-law, who had cervical cancer twice, surgically removed, came back again a 3rd time, did it with CBD, and it never came back. My wife gets migraines even when I'm not around, and so it works for her also.
You've seen the movie Weed the People?
I have not.
Okay, the Weed the People is very moving. It's got sort of a silly name, but it's the story of a documentary that follows 4 kids, pediatric cancer patients. And
Stanley
in
brothers.
the end,
Stanley brothers.
3 are go into remission and 1 doesn't. But 3 out of 4, and you're seeing the images of the cancers, and you're seeing them shrink, as they use more and more cannabis with the help of outside purveyors, of non-traditional purveyors. And it's like you go, this works. This just works. This is not coincidence we're watching here. So what you're describing is it's out there.
Well, it's a singular word that is the word that's at risk in our culture, but it's the word upon which our entire species will thrive if we can recapture it and share its meaning. It's the word trust. And we all trust our own experience. I'll just give you my 2 other bullets.
Good.
My 2 other bullets is I dedicated my life 20 years ago only to social impact across media. I'm a media producer, business and nonprofits. And I work a lot with the UN. And SDG 3, Good Health and Wellness, fully embraces where all cannabinoids, not just CBD, can go. So I feel very justified to be here. And then finally, entropy. I'm an entrepreneur. I've raised money many, many times. I've helped start almost 50 companies. And I happen to be aggregating board positions, advisories, up until recently. And I suddenly realized that I had an entire ecology of values-aligned associates in leading positions around the world. So I'm building a meta-ecology with a lot of capital, a lot of best-of-breed players, all values-aligned across the entire ecology, from seed all the way through to retail, and with most of the pickaxe and blue jeans components inside, less focused on retail. That's a zoo right now, 1,000 brands.
We will get to that actually if we have time to get to it.
Okay, I'm done.
So yeah, that is it's decidedly an issue. I assume many of the people in this room saw last Sunday's New York Times Magazine. It's a picture of a CBD gummy bear, very handsome, green. The headline is, "Can CBD really do all that?" And then around the gummy bear there are little arrows, and it says, if you'll give me a second here, heals PTSD, heals brain injury, cures cancer, stops epilepsy, speeds recovery from workouts, lowers blood sugar, lessens arthritis pain, prevents anxiety, calms dogs, relieves menstrual cramps, helps you sleep, soothes, rejuvenates skin, fighting graft versus host disease, halts psychosis, slows Alzheimer's dementia, curbs anger, reverses depression, slows Parkinson's, treats Crohn's, and promotes recovery from opioid addiction. About all it's missing is that it will heal the lame and make the blind see again. And I'm sure there are claims to that effect. In the last few days, there have been stories. One had the headline, "Study finds CBD can help treat opioid addiction." Next one is, "Study finds," all the same headline, "Study finds CBD effective in treating heroin addiction." The possibilities here are many, but I'm going to ask the people on the panel, are all these promises obscuring what this can really do? Are people going to the antidote expecting that they'll get a better mark on their SAT and they'll get into Stanford? Is too much being promised? Your thoughts?
It's interesting. I'm a scientist at heart, so I make evidence-based decision making. I want to see the science support these claims. However, there is something you said about anecdotal evidence as well. And a lot of the research that is to be done is based off of anecdotal evidence. Why did this happen? Why do I feel better when I use this compound? And you see it time and time again how a lot of those claims, without a doubt, are 100% accurate. I'm the former production director at Spark in San Francisco, at least at the time I was there. It's the largest vertically integrated dispensary in the state of California, and we had one patient, a gentleman would come in, and he every morning would get the same exact product. He would get Cannatonic, which is a high CBD cultivar of cannabis, and this gentleman has autism, and it manifests in him as the inability to speak. However, he's very high functioning. He does, contract work with NASA Goddard, Google, Apple. And so he would come in, get his eighth of Canatonic, and that spark you can vaporize right there on site. And I go set it up for him, and he would go and vaporize, and about 60 seconds later, 90 seconds later, he just starts talking. No speech impediment, nothing. You would never even know that there was something going on. And that right there, I think, was the moment I truly saw the magic of what CBD can do. But now, having said that, CBD is just one cannabinoid. There are 113 known cannabinoids, with another 21 at the University of British Columbia may have just discovered. We still have to completely identify them, but so there's roughly 134 cannabinoids. CBD is just one. It's a very
There was a time when there was no CBD. All we knew was THC.
Yep.
And we've interviewed people on the show who have spoken about how, well, we just used to throw the CBD away. We didn't know what to do with it. They don't throw it away anymore. No. They don't throw it away anymore.
I'd like to kind of add to that, if you don't mind.
Yes.
I think the problem is that with an article like this, there are so many bad actors out there that are making these claims, and what the studies are showing are high levels of CBD, of cannabinoids, as opposed to hemp seed oil, which is what a lot of people put in their product without real cannabinoids. So I think that a lot of those bad actors will get filtered through the system. And to your point, the retail space, which we are really active in and fortunate enough to participate in, with CBD. But I think that what the real problem is that you've got a lack of education out there, and people think, oh, let me take a gummy, let me have one dropper full of 300 milligrams CBD, and hey, I'm going to be cured. And that's just not the way it is. So I think it's incumbent upon the leaders of the industry and the people who are here at the beginning to really educate people out there.
I think that you need to have them understand, especially in the cannabinoid world, it's a lifestyle. It's not, I can do it today.
It's like a diet.
It's a diet. I know that when we created skincare, we were looking for something that we didn't have to teach a new routine to, that we could add the CBD, it would be a natural progression. The skincare itself was bomb, and whether you thought CBD was placebo or not, then when you found out the added benefits of CBD and you actually saw, you were a believer. It did all the talking. It took less pressure off of me to educate and give people the knowledge of what CBD can do with the inflammation in your body and the soreness, the arthritis, getting your fingers to move better. It's trying to get the products in the hands of the public, because once they get them in their hands, they're going to see the benefits for themselves. Whether you start with just like some mobility issues or something like that.
And to really expand on that, succinctly to answer your question, I think it's a good thing that that's on the cover of the New York Times Magazine, because it's sparking a conversation.
That's what we
which I think is what we want to happen. So, I mean, I can go into
wrong questions,
I agree.
whatever, and everyone needs to keep getting more answers.
Right, and I could go into cannabinoid science and talk about how, CBD doesn't fit into the CB1 and how it works with THC and why we actually need all the cannabinoids in our system, not just CBD. But just to have that on the cover of the New York Times Magazine makes my phone start ringing, because what we do is we teach new and existing consumers how to incorporate cannabis into their lifestyle, right? What are the applications? How do I microserve? So when women, which is the demo that I primarily work with, see that on the cover of New York Times Magazine, it provokes them to pick up the phone and call, or at least ask Siri and go to the internet. And we want that to happen.
My question, though, was really, with too much promise, does it dilute the promise? Are people expecting truly a miracle that I will start taking CBD and next week I'll climb Mount Everest?
They are expecting that. The number one call that I get
It is the miracle plant.
It is a miracle, yes.
It's the miracle plant.
Yeah, but they are expecting that, and I think that's okay. I mean, we know that consumers are 10% of the population, so that's fine if they think it's going to cure my problems, because then at least it provokes them to try it. And the number one question I get is, I took it one time and it didn't work.
Right, correct.
Then we go into an explanation and the education.
Let me speak to that question in terms of why it didn't work sometimes. Dilution can be a factor. Here's a scary story about dilution from a friend who spoke here last year. a gentleman in, I use the term loosely, in Las Vegas bought a gallon of industrial paint thinner at a hardware store and bought some 1 ounce Chinese-made eyedropper bottles. And so he poured out 128, he put 3 drops of cannabis oil in the gallon of industrial paint thinner and then poured it out into 128 bottles. So you were getting this, a couple of micrograms of cannabis oil mixed up with industrial paint thinner in a bottle that had a label on it that said tincture of cannabis. So that was an extreme case of dilution. The scary part of the story is the legal side of the story. His defense was that you can't charge me in federal court with violating the Federal Food and Drug and Cosmetic Act. FDA can't come after me for doing that because the DEA says cannabis is illegal. Therefore, the consumer is 50% to blame for buying my product.
That's a colorful defense. That's
Yes.
kind of, yes. The person who was murdered is half guilty because it was them who was murdered. Mr. Traub.
Yeah, I'm going to actually take a position that's antithetical to myself, which makes me an inverse schizophrenic. Yesterday, I actually began by talking about the negative side of the FDA, the fact that it's one pill for one ailment for everybody, which is just not how CBD works. It's more aligned with genetics and DNA, et cetera. And so that won't work for the FDA, which they're under a lot of pressure from the pharma to maintain because that's the incubus that they've manifest. I asked the question, what's the other side of the FDA? And I got a call the other day saying, watch what's going to happen now. Watch all the manufacturing and all the extraction plants, a lot of them being shut down because they're not GMP certified. This is about to sweep across the country. And the first thing I thought about was, wow, I wonder who's paying for that. And then I suddenly realized on the other side, well, this is also good. And it's really, there was my graduate school thesis, and one of the reasons why I started speaking at this conference in '91 was on using virtual reality to model family therapy in '89. They thought I was crazy. But the opening quote on my thesis was, technology is neither good nor evil, it's how you use it.
Exactly.
And I really believe that the regulation underneath it all has good intention. And in fact, most of the people on the ground, this was Dr. Sue saying this, they're really trying to protect the consumer. So I think it's really hard to do anything other than focus on integrity, best of breed, biosustainable product that would get 5 stars on a certification if there was one, beyond whatever kind of certification the FDA itself might ultimately.
And this is indeed why I'm very grateful for Janice and her stores, because she carefully curates the products. So I know that when I get something at the Antidote, it will be what it says it is.
And that is to her advantage.
It's not the ice cream place up in the valley that for $2 extra will put CBD oil on your fudge ripple. God knows what they're giving you. It's not the several coffee shops around town that for a couple bucks extra will give you CBD in your coffee. I mean, who knows what they're giving. But we do have, as has been hinted here, a problem with research. I was at a very interesting seminar at UCLA where it was about cannabis and cancer, and they kept saying over and over again, but there is no peer review here. There are no $1 million blind testings. Everything is anecdotal. We can't really say, we don't know. And this brings me to a few years ago, the National Academy of Medicine, that's a pretty big name there, they convened a panel of 16 leading medical experts to analyze the scientific literature on cannabis. The report came out in January of 2017. It was 468 pages long, and what it determined was that they couldn't determine anything. They said it's widely supposed to diminish the nausea associated with chemotherapy, but the panel pointed out there are no good quality randomized trials investigating this option. We have evidence for marijuana as a treatment of pain, but very little is known about the efficacy, dose, routes of administration, or side effects of commonly used and commercially available cannabis products in the United States. It goes on and on and on through epilepsy, through Parkinson's, through Huntington's, through dementia, through glaucoma, through anxiety. Everything says not sufficient evidence. And there isn't sufficient evidence because the government won't let there be sufficient evidence. At UCLA, the scientists said they can't accept funds from cannabis producers because UCLA restricts that. Guys, how do we get around this? We got something here that's miraculous. It sure is miraculous in my life. It's helped me so much. It's helped my daughter and her anxiety so much. How the heck do we get around this? I mean, aside from, electing someone who actually inhaled. Go ahead.
I was going to say, we don't have to just stay in the United States ecosystem. It's banned here. We do. McGill University up in Canada just opened up, a rather large cannabis research
and
institute.
Israel is quite full.
And I was going to say, Israel is eating our lunch right now when it comes to cannabis research.
But it's kosher.
It's kosher, yes. But having said that, this is a medicine that I believe it was 5,200 years ago. The Chinese pharmacopoeia claimed that cannabis is the most important medicine of all the medicines in the pharmacopoeia.
Yeah, that was in 2500 BC.
Yeah, 25. Excuse me. Yeah, mix and it's it's one of those things where we've known a lot about cannabis for a very long time. However, we don't have the studies to support a lot of the claims, and so that's where that issue is. We've known about what cannabis can do for quite some time. Just I need to be able to say with 95% certainty that it's going to make there's going to be, I can reject a null hypothesis if you want to get nerdy about it. But we just don't have that. However, Israel does, and we can. But the difference is it's not, cannabis is not one active ingredient. It's not like aspirin, take 2 pills and call me in the morning type of thing. Once again, 113 known cannabinoids, and not only that, there are over 200 terpenes, and terpenes also have medical benefit. For example, linalool and beta-caryophyllene, which is, linalool is lavender. That's what that lavender smell is. Those are smooth muscle relaxers. So those are the whole sativa versus indica feel that people talk about actually has more to do with the terpenes than they have to do with the cannabinoids. CBN is the only cannabinoid that we know of that's a smooth muscle relaxer. Alpha-pinene and limonene, I kind of guess you probably know what that is. Lemon, citrus, and pine. Those are bronchodilators.
Terpenes, for those who are wondering, are the aromas, the smells.
Exactly, and so those have medical benefit too. So it's not just, okay, you know what, well, here's a medicine and it treats one diagnosis. This is a medicine that has hundreds of active ingredients and it treats hundreds of different ailments. So it's very difficult to do research on that.
Miss Kindness, what are we to do?
Well, there is no one size fits all, right? That's what we know about cannabis. I think that what's really important for me in my business and practice in reaching this wellness, person, this woman or man who's not currently using cannabis and doesn't understand the applications. We talk about things like terpenes and we make it very simple. We say, like how lavender relaxes you. We accept that in our society. Even though we don't use lavender as medicine, we accept that the terpenes in lavender, we believe that it relaxes us. So when we make it very relational like that, that's how I talk about cannabis. And so I think that's just the gateway conversation, right?
I like that. You're setting expectations low but warmly and over-delivering.
Yes.
Or you hope for the best and you expect the worst. As we go through life. Ms. Deutsch.
I just want to say that the one thing we haven't addressed here on the regulatory side is that the FTC is going to come in. The FDA is going to be nothing compared to what the FTC is going to do, because they are a much more aggressive enforcement agency than the FDA is. So whereas the FDA may send letters out, etc., the FTC is going to be looking very carefully at the studies that come out and the claims that go along with those studies. So I just think we just all have to have a word of caution, and everybody has to be really seriously looking at it, because they are going to go after the people that are making cancer claims on just CBD. They are going to go after people with the Parkinson's and the Alzheimer claims, and those are the first ones they do. So if you get a letter from the FTC, be fearful. It's very, very scary what they can do, and they come after you personally too.
Mr. Schubring, you want to get a word in?
Charges.
Correct.
A point relating to what all three of you just said. When we first got into the business of legal cannabis, what a lot of folks don't understand about how FDA, the Federal Food and Drug Act, is structured is this. The Food and Drug Act is structured not to police what doctors can do. Doctors are presumed to know what they're doing. The law is written to police what drug companies can claim about their product. So the one pill fits for one disease paradigm actually arose because a drug company was only allowed to claim what it could actually prove about their drug related to a disease when they marketed it to doctors. Now, if doctors caucused among themselves and figured out, oh, geez, this drug can be used for 35 different diseases, and here's how we use it. Well, doctors are free to make that decision themselves and advise their patients what to take and how to take it and write prescriptions for it. The issue is that drug companies are not allowed to make crazy, spurious claims about what their stuff is able to do, and so it's a matter of trying to weed out the bad actors. The guy is diluting CBD in a gallon of paint thinner and telling people this is medicine, take it and get sick. And if you get sicker, take more.
Janice, now you're down the trenches with people coming into the store.
Having gone through everything in THC world and the rules and regulations, I feel certain 3 to 5 years from now, CBD will have the same rules and regulations. I know that we act in a very big filtering and protective way because we've always done that and tested our products. So the CBD that we use, we also test when it comes to me as a medical grade isolate or distillate. That's great, I have a piece of paper, but I still send it out for myself. And then every time we add it to batch it to another product, we will test the whole batch, and then we will also pull a sample product when it's finished, so that anything we write on the front of the label, if it's 30 milligrams of CBD, I want 30 milligrams of CBD in that product. I think that there's going to have to be a lot of self-regulating and policing right now. The word trust would be a great word for everyone to try to get back. I know everyone's burnt in today's society with the word trust, but it's kind of being mindful of others and the benefits. And look, the government was so quick for us all to embrace antibiotics, and that's a full spectrum plant we're taking from the rainforest. Why not be where we're proactive in health, and maybe CBD is going to be the good health where it keeps you healthy.
Janice, when someone comes to your store with an ailment, let us say knee pain, how cautious are you in terms of what you recommend, in terms of a certain caveat of this has been shown to help,
we'll
but
go through,
might
we'll
not?
ask them questions of exactly how the knee pain started. I mean, if you tore something or your Achilles ruptured or whatever, I'm going to have a hard time. I can numb a little bit, but I'm not going to heal you, and I can't heal you. I can help you with the pains, depending on how many layers of skin you are trying to penetrate. We'll do that, but using someone, if they have a topical cream, is our easiest entryway into educating them, where they get comfortable with the products. And I can usually get someone who will take a pain relief cream this week. Next week, they'll start with tinctures. And like you were talking about with the terpenes, there's a lot of natural terpenes just in the foods that we eat now. And although you're taking CBD and you don't want any THC, you can always add that and pair it with some mint. And the mint will help your receptors grab hold of the CBD better. I mean, there's a lot of essential oils out there that with the pairing like lavender and things of that sort that companies have done. I mean, if you believe in the Arnicas and you're an Air One shopper or a Whole Food shopper and they have those products in there, well, you'll start to see some of those companies that use high-grade essential oils, and they're going to start to pair it. Because you have to have a license, you have to use everything that's hemp-derived CBD. You can't do anything cannabis-derived CBD.
Since we have to wrap this up, I'm being told, we just have a few minutes left because I have to set up food in here. If we had this panel 10 years from now, would it exist? Would this panel even exist? Or is this going to
I think you're going to be
Take care
inside
of itself.
CVS in 10 years from now. We'll just be
The-
sitting
5
back
years.
there, the poor, huh?
Yeah, 5 years. And the audience will change. I think right now we're preaching to the choir. Everyone in here, we can use words like cannabinoid and terpene, and you all don't flinch. But the challenge is reaching the non-consumer and getting them to really understand how
The
to
purpose
begin
of the high on the hog.
Yes,
What is
exactly. And the
THC?
antidote
What is
and club
CBD?
kindness. Yeah.
Mr. Traub?
I actually have an answer for the last round, and I have a response to this one, so I'll just get them out.
The clock is ticking.
I was just using a little time to think. So, anyway, 6 months ago, I had this panel, and there was a startling realization that emerged, and that was the way things are going with the people that control labor, land, water. The marketplace is very quickly going to shift, at least on the cultivation side, from all of the, or many of the rogue farmers that have been doing this with their fingers in the soil, trying to do the very best, to the large farming. And one of the conclusions that came was, it'll be the artisans who survive the corporatocracy on the cultivation side, which segues me to the 3 points I wanted to make on the last question was, my response was one of philosophy, and that is, number one, in sports, if you're swimming, you're not supposed to look at any of the other swimmers. You've got to stay focused on yourself, so that every brain cell you have is dedicated on your own performance. It's essential that everybody in this business focus on doing the best they can and have the highest quality they can, the most biosustainable they can, using data. I think that data was an outcome of all the panels. Number two, people know when you're honest. People know when you're authentic. So it's essential, again, that integrity is at the core of your defining principles and your mission statement and the way you manage your people. And the last point I want to make is, I believe that relationships are always more important than any deal or transaction. And in this case, your relationships are your consumers. And your consumers will include your parents. You have to make sure that you have in mind your own family as your consumer. So that's the way to rise above. Don't be thinking about what other people are doing. Just stay focused on being the best and having the most integrity you can.
You know, you had asked the question, what will this be like in 10 years?
Yeah.
Well, what's interesting is I have a pretty huge secondary family, and we were all up in Seattle a couple years ago for one of my cousins' bar mitzvahs, and only the 20-some-year-old kids were going to the dispensaries. This last year, we went for a wedding for one of my cousins up there. And all the surgeons and the doctors and the private equity guys in my family were like, wait a second, who wants to go to the dispensary? I've never been there before, right? So my husband and I were the grand leaders of the family on this particular trip. But I do think that what is happening now is, I know that a lot of you have been in the business for a really long time, and I've been making marijuana cookies for 37 years. But what's different is that we're at the beginning of the critical mass. And I think that that's the biggest thing. It's like now when you have conversations, people say, oh, do you get high? I get high. Like they're not afraid to talk about it. Whereas before it would be like the hidden, shh, don't tell anybody. Am I a Republican or a Democrat? Let's not talk about it, right? Now they're talking about it and they're interested.
And that is well said. And I tend to think of it as sushi. Like sushi, it began on the West Coast. And now you could find it in Des Moines. I want to thank David. I want to thank Robert. I want to thank Janice, Nancy, Ms. Kindness, and Dr. Rob for being part of the panel. I was hoping to get hello. Well, they're making various.
One question.
One question.
Trust issue and educating consumers. And my question is, what challenges are you facing educating consumers, particularly new consumers that come into the businesses, and how are you overcoming some of the economic issues that they may have regarding the price of these products?
Since they're chasing us out, perhaps you could ask this on the side afterwards.
I'll help you.
Yeah.
It sounds like this is going to take a while to
Watch
answer.
popular media. That's where the education is going to come from. Every network has 10 shows in they're thinking right now, across reality, feature films, streaming.
Literally
and
when I
and
brew.
watch what happens. We'll see.
The show is High on the Hog, the podcast. I'm Merrill Schindler. Thank you, David, Robert, Janice, Nancy, Ms. Kindness, and Dr. Rob. As I was saying, once again, they have to come in here and set up lunch, so stick around for lunch. And keep buying your CBD. It works.
I'm from Montgomery, Alabama. Well, now that they